What is up, my glue-soaked ghouls? It's Chris with Tabletops and Tentacles, here with a little bit of a different video this time around. I thought instead of going through all of the minis for this particular installment, I would film me trying to assemble them. So, important caveat here, these are the first bones I've assembled, and probably some of the first miniatures I've assembled, so I don't exactly know what I'm doing here. I obviously have plenty of experience as an old grognard assembling metal miniatures, and compared to those, this was a delight compared to the the old heyday of trying to glue pewter and lead. Like, they used to come in the tiniest pieces, and granted, my hands were smaller back then, but it was a nightmare. This is just me clipping the minis off of the sprues. I'm just using a standard pair of cutters here with a nice flush cut on them. I was using a different pair, and I found that a fresh, nice new pair is almost essential for something like this to get a nice clean cut, particularly when the sprue is attached to something that is going into a slot and needs that nice clean connection. I did think that most of the minis with the bones, aside from some stretchiness in some spots that didn't quite fit where they went, I did find it fairly easy to actually assemble most of these, which was really nice because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So I test fitted all of them after I cut them. I trimmed them back a little bit. I didn't get too into the whole careful detailing of mold lines and that kind of thing. I figured that was something I could work on before I painted them after I got them assembled, because it's what I decided to do. So some of the smaller ones, like this particular little goblin necromancer, I don't know, I'm not even sure what I'm assembling here. Maybe it's maybe this is a reaper. I definitely found that the closer to the sprue I cut it was good, but on a few of them I actually found that cutting it out a little bit and then sanding it back with either a little file or just a little bit of scraping from some razor blades was good, because they did if you cut too close on some of them, you lost some of your details, especially on a few of them, like the Grave Kings. One of them, the way their cloak was waved, you had to be really careful about cutting the sprue off so that you didn't nip the cape as well. So there were a few like this one where I thought it was worthwhile to cut it a little further out and then scrape it back with a razor blade. And then I used a little file here, which was plus and minus. I think I like the scraping method slightly better than the file, but the file does give a nicer finish, so I kind of varied back and forth between them. The file tends to almost slightly melt the plastic and give it a flatter surface, but there was sometimes a little bit of overhang cleanup I needed to do as well. Sometimes I had no idea how they fit together. So this was new to me as far as how all of these connected. Most of the bones ones do have like an L shape to sort of tell you where they're supposed to go, but in some cases that L shape is pretty imaginary. But I still enjoyed this process more than I expected to. I thought that the fiddly assembly, especially with my big fat fingers, was going to be something I absolutely hated, and it's a different aspect. It calls back to the whole model building that I used to do when I was younger, and I enjoyed that part of it. And the invention of superglue accelerant, which I probably overused in this assembly video, is a delight to me, because I know all too well the awful days of pinning and holding superglue until it had cured on pewter, and I was terrified about the idea of doing that with these, especially as many as needed assembly. But they ended up being pretty decent. So here I'm gonna just cut a couple more off the sprues, test assemble them, and then we'll start gluing them together. So for glue, I'm just using a Glue Masters medium glue, big old jar of it. I'll leave links below to all of them that I got off of Amazon. It was pretty reasonable for something this size. I do find that the tip gets a little beat up and you need some pliers to get it open sometimes because it starts to get some glue into the grooves, but it's usually not too bad. And man, I like not having to run out of those tiny little tubes. Put some of it on a piece of plastic here just as a sort of dipping pad, and then I put my BSI accelerant into the top of that weighted pill bottle there as sort of a way to use it without using the spray every time. As you can see, I kind of bounced around a lot with the gluing techniques I used. I dipped some of them I caressed lightly with a toothpick, some of them I globbed it directly on, and I'm still not entirely sure which method is the best for me, but I do definitely think that the accelerant has improved my ability to glue these without making a giant mess. But I will say that I still had no identifiable fingerprints due to the layers of glue on my fingers by the time I was done with these guys. But, you know, that's all part of it, right? I did like the technique of using the paintbrush to apply the accelerant on one side and then dipping it into the other side and just touching the pieces together. It worked really effectively. You'll see I put that in the wrong hole there, but it all worked out in the long run. I did like that method. I would say definitely use an old paintbrush. It's a piece of crap that you're never gonna use again, particularly because as you get into like your 16th or 17th or 70th miniature, you do occasionally forget what you're dipping into what, and you might occasionally glue the paintbrush to a miniature because you forgot there was glue in there. So have an extra one if you decide to use that method. I did really like how most of these fit together. I had a few of them that I really struggled with alignment on, but most of that came down to me not test fitting before I put the glue on the minis. And a few of them I also tended to over glue or over accelerant, and I needed to wipe that up a little bit. I love the blue shop towels that you can get at Costco, by the way. I prefer them over regular paper towels immensely. They're more absorbent and don't have a texture to them, which means you can be a little more precise with them as well. I did like how some of these fit together. Some of them were a little challenging. Like this guy here has it's like he's holding the Book of the Dead in one hand, and it connects at the hip and the shoulder. And I actually really did like that, but I did find that sometimes I needed to use a pair of pliers like this to then promptly glue my hand to it, but to keep it from getting glue all over my fingers on both sides when I tried to stick it down. One of the Nazgul, and I can't remember what they call them in this, but the mounted Death Knight guys has a single loose leg that was kind of unusually difficult to position properly, so you could put him on his saddle with his leg at the same time. The accelerant is particularly valuable for the Reaper miniatures like this because there are a few of them, like the giant here, whose legs don't quite fit into the bases where they're supposed to go. And having something that instantly bonds within a few seconds is so nice to be able to just kind of put them where they need to go, hold them in place for a couple seconds, and let go, and boom, they're good. I really like this giant, by the way. I think he's really cool looking. He's got a very Skyrim vibe to him, but I love the ship wheel that's hanging off his chest and the vultures that are clinging to him. I just think he's a really cool design. I did really like the system of wetting the spots that they step into with the accelerant and then just simply stomping them into the super glue. Sometimes I didn't have enough. I needed to add just a little bit more to it. But this worked really well for bases like this in particular, where their feet didn't quite fit right, and I needed to stretch them out a little bit to make them work. I think that worked really nicely for most of the minis that I had issues with that way. Doesn't help the bendy swords, but it certainly helps the bendy legs. So anyway, that is me assembling a couple of these guys. Obviously I did this for quite a while longer besides this. I highly recommend having a fan with a little bit of ventilation, and an old paintbrush with this accelerant is just such a fun way of doing this without getting the accelerant everywhere. That spray bottle's great, but boy does it make a mess when it sprays. It is not a precision instrument. You can also get a larger container of the accelerant and use a dip thing, and I actually ended up swapping out from that pill bottle later and was using a stainless steel shot glass instead, and I found that actually more efficient because the plastic it doesn't do anything to the plastic, but it feels like it affects the consistency of the accelerant slightly after a certain amount of time. So I swapped it out for a stainless steel shot glass, and that worked a lot more effectively. I also like to use toothpicks for poking things like glue and moving it around or smearing things where they need to go. And then obviously, the most important step before I start painting these guys is to take them all in and give them a good washing. Old toothbrush, some soapy water, get all that mold release and accelerant and everything else off of them, plus my terrified greasy sweating fingers as I did these, because boy, I was nervous about this. But by the time I'd finished all of them from the core set, I really did find myself enjoying the process. And hopefully you enjoyed watching me learning how to enjoy the process. And again, like I said, if you are looking for anything I use in this video, I will have links to them on Amazon below, and those are affiliate links, so if you click on them, I get a couple pennies and you still pay the same price. It helps out the channel a little bit and helps support indie artists who are pretending like they know how to paint minis. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll be back with another core set turnaround after this, and then I'm going to start diving into some expansion packs too, which I'm really excited about. Thanks for watching. May you live in interesting times.